Hello and welcome to the Digital Insight, the technology, procurement and supply chain podcast that delivers valuable C-level perspective into the core issues surrounding business transformation and digital disruption. Each episode will bring you the most inspiring executive insights from those who are leading transformation strategies within the world's biggest and best-known companies. The Digital Insight. Disrupt, transform, evolve.
Welcome to the Digital Insight, the official podcast series for the CPO Strategy and Interface magazines. Today I'm joined by Ranjit Rajan, a thought leader on the impact of digital transformation on economies, business, and the tech industry, with a specialization in the emerging markets of the Middle East and Africa. In this episode, we explore the digital transformation and innovation curve of the UAE, the challenges and overall progress of the UAE Vision 2021, and we look at how technology and innovation can help establish the UAE as one of the happiest countries in the world. Ranjit, welcome to the Digital Insight.
Thanks, Dale.
I'm looking forward to speaking to you. So as a way of kicking things off then, for our listeners, can you tell me a little bit about yourself professionally, your sort of career and background and your experience, particularly when it comes to the concept of digital transformation and broader technology?
Yeah, sure. So I have had the opportunity of being part of the technology industry for the past 2 decades. And during that time, during the first half of that period, I have largely been on the industry side, which is I've been in roles mostly related to marketing and business development with technology vendors. And then during the second half, essentially over the last decade or so, I have mostly been playing the role of an analyst, a researcher, and a digital transformation advisor to organizations. My area of coverage has largely been emerging markets, Middle East, Turkey, and Africa in particular. And here I've had the opportunity to work closely with senior executives at various organizations across industries and sectors, advising them on digital transformation.
Perfect. And you said right there, digital transformation defines essentially your entire career. You worked as an analyst and you speak with people regularly about essentially explaining, understanding what digital transformation is. And, I speak to a lot of people who talk and we talk through their transformation journeys. And one thing that I've sort of to spot most recently is that it's become almost a bit of a buzzword. It's almost like if you're not doing it, why aren't you doing it? But the biggest challenge I'm understanding is, well, what does it mean? How does a company go about defining exactly what digital transformation means?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is digital transformation is one of those buzzwords that's usually comes up in every conversation that you have these days, not just with CIOs and technology leaders, but with any business executive. And I think I think a lot of the traditional IT work is now being rebranded as digital transformation. But in reality, digital transformation actually refers to significant disruptive transformation in business processes and business models. It entails the use of advanced technologies such as AI and blockchain and cloud and big data analytics and so on to disrupt business processes, to redesign customer experiences, to develop new revenue streams and business models, and to monetize organizational and ecosystem data to drive change within the industry. So it means quantum improvements and step changes in customer experiences, in operational efficiencies, and in business models. I think that is what digital transformation seeks to achieve. But I agree with you that many organizations do look at traditional IT work and rebrand them as a digital transformation, and therefore you see a lot of that conversation around digital transformation being diluted by that approach.
And you touched on something quite interesting there, that it is essentially a rebrand. I remember speaking to a person who worked in banking in Europe, and he was in IT, and he said one day his sort of chief executive team sort of came to him and said, well, we need to be looking at digital. And he turned around and said to me, well, I work in IT. That's all I've done is digital. It's just now becoming more of a, like I said, then a hot topic, a buzzword. So looking specifically at a company and the people inside that company, how has their perception of what, traditional IT and technology changed in terms of, once upon a time that might have been left to an IT guy or a tech division. Now it's actually everybody needs to have an understanding on it. So how has that changed?
Well, it's changed in several ways. So one is that the business leaders have become much more aware of the possibilities that the technology can offer, and so they are able to look at technology from the prism of business outcomes. And then on the other, the advancement in technology and the emergence of technologies such as AI and blockchain and robotics and 3D printing have created such new use cases which were not possible before. And because of that, and these use cases are largely industry and business use cases. And so therefore, it now gives an opportunity for the technology leaders to reach out to business and tell them that they can leverage these technologies, they can offer these technologies to transform business outcomes. And at the same time, from the business's point of view, from the line of business executive standpoint, he or she can now, is much more aware of what is possible with technology. And therefore, he or she is now proactively reaching out to the technology leaders and asking them for ideas and suggestions on how they can support their lines of business. So it's working both ways now, and this alignment between the CIO and the IT department and the line of business executive is absolutely critical for the success of digital transformation.
And sticking with sort of the broad look then at transformation, and you talked about that kind of the executive's approach has changed. What about basically everybody in that organization then, in terms of, now that tech is becoming ingrained in most, if not all, companies, how is that changing and impacting the person on every level? So, their job's essentially been completely redefined through technology. So how do you go about navigating that change and ensuring they are brought along these journeys and that they continue to be, I don't want to say the right people, but, they are empowered by tech?
Well, yeah, that is an interesting question. So, what is happening within organizations has been greatly influenced by how employees use technology in their personal lives, or how technology has been impacting the personal lives of employees as individuals. So in our personal lives, our personal lives have been transformed by by technologies such as smartphones and mobility, by the use of social media, by the various applications that we use, and how we interact with our with our service providers, with our consumer services organizations, with the government, etc. Now, because of that, employees now, when they go to their workplace, they are looking at technology differently. They want to have the same experience that they have in their personal lives at the workplace as well. So now they are demanding, that they have similar kinds of experiences at the workplace, and that is putting increasing pressure on the technology departments and the senior executives to transform, processes and services within the organization. And of course, the customers of the organization are also demanding greater use of technology in their services and products. And so therefore, the pressure on organizations today is tremendous. On the one hand, you have customers who are demanding more. Their needs are constantly changing. They are heavily influenced by technology. And so you have to step up and you have to offer services which are augmented by technology. And you have to offer them at the level that, at the service level that is being offered by the large, digital services companies and social media networks like Facebook and Google and others. So you have to offer services on par with those. And at the same time, your employees are also consumers of these, technology augmented services. So on both sides, you are under pressure. So you have to look at transforming your services to your customers and also the experience that you provide to your employees within the organization. And that is that's a lot of pressure for the technology teams, but also for the management.
And you touched upon the customer there, about the modern day customer is more demanding than ever before, has more access to information, more access to technology than ever before. How do you stay abreast of exactly what that customer wants? How important is it, while trying to navigate this transformation, that you continue to keep that customer right at the heart of what you do, so that while you are transforming, while you are implementing new technologies and changing your business, you're not just doing it to serve the bottom line or to serve internal metrics. It's actually, first and foremost, to better serve a customer.
It is indeed challenging. Customer needs are constantly changing, and customers, the way that customer uses technology and how they utilize a service is also constantly changing. And so therefore, organizations need to be very agile, very flexible, and constantly on top of what those customers' needs are. And this has to be done not at a mass level. This has to be done at the level of a single individual customer. So you have to look at hyper-personalization and offering individualized services. And that is now possible with technology. So it is possible by leveraging technologies such as big data analytics, artificial intelligence. You're now able to understand the needs of a customer as an individual at an individual level, and offer hyper personalized services to their customers. So therefore, it is possible with these emerging technologies to do that. The question is, how many organizations are really doing that, and how many of them have a strategy to do that?
And sticking with technologies, then, I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. How do you kind of sift through the noise? You said it right then. You mentioned some key technologies already, and what that kind of lends itself to is saying that, well, actually, there's so many new technologies out there. There's, like I said, there's so many new emerging technologies out there. As a business looking to embrace this digital innovation curve and digitally transform, how do you go about understanding what's the right technology, as opposed to going, let's take that technology because two of our competitors are using it?
Yeah, well, I think that there has to be a longer term strategy to look at not technology, but to look at the business overall. Look at those customer touch points that that create the maximum level of friction for customers, and then try to make them frictionless. So what progressive organizations are doing is that they're looking at their customer life experiences and creating customer journeys. So it's not just about providing an individual service to a customer, but it's about tying those services together to address a particular customer life experience, and therefore creating a customer journey. Now, and once you do that, then you kind of look at which technology makes sense in order to create less friction at various customer touch points. Now, in some cases, it might be AI that could work. In some cases, it could be some other technology. But then you kind of build your technology story from the customer experience story.
And with some organizations, and one of the biggest challenges I've heard is sort of one of legacy, is in terms of, well, it's a very successful organization that's got to a certain point, and successfully so, and now needs to look at, modernizing itself, for lack of a better word. But obviously, as it does that, it has a lot of, like I say, legacy to it. So it's operated in such a certain way, almost basically saying, well, don't fix what isn't broken, but obviously you have to. So what other sort of key challenges are there? If that's one of the biggest challenges, what other challenges does a company face as it looks to begin and embrace a digital transformation journey?
Well, there's several challenges for organizations that have been around for a while. Clearly, legacy systems, and not just legacy systems, but also legacy processes, the organizational culture, mindset of the employees, all of them are hurdles to transformation. Oftentimes, organizations have been built in a certain way that they have silos of innovation. They have data silos. Each department has its own data sets that are not shared across the organization. They have old technology that is perhaps not amenable to to change and transformation. And so there are a number of hurdles that organizations need to overcome while they transform. And all of it can't be done overnight, and they have to start working on each of these pieces along the way. But in terms of technology itself, I think it's important for organizations to consider developing a single unified architecture, a single unified digital architecture, wherein they can then plug in various new technologies that they want to adopt. And that architecture will need to enable flow of data across departments and businesses within the organization. It should also enable the augmentation of that data with intelligence using AI and machine learning and all of that. And should also be able to integrate customer experience applications and services easily. And the other thing that's important when you look at this is that organizations no longer exist in silos within the industries. They're part of larger ecosystems, and it is really the power of the ecosystem that matters at the end of the day. And so therefore, organizations need to have a technology strategy or technology architecture to which other entities within the ecosystem can easily integrate and seamlessly transfer data and do transactions. And so therefore, for organizations which have legacy systems, it will take time for them to move and to overcome these hurdles. But there are organizations that have done this quite effectively by leveraging technologies such as cloud, for example, moving some of their traditional infrastructure and legacy systems onto the cloud for greater agility. And also integrating their data to create a unified data strategy. But I guess the most important hurdle that organizations have is really cultural change, and that often takes some time. And that many organizations have been working on strategies where they are trying to raise awareness, and oftentimes the top-down digital transformation vision needs to be is not properly communicated down the various levels of the organization. And I think that some organizations have been quite successful in doing that and setting up clear goals for transformation for the organization, and then communicating that effectively down the different levels of the organization.
And sort of sticking along those themes, you mentioned obviously about having a clear vision, having sort of clear goals. And obviously, when you zoom out as much as possible, there is a point A and a point B that you want to get to. But as we all know, the journey is not going to be a straight line. There's going to be complexities. There's going to be both internal and external factors that are going to, make you go in different directions along that way. How important is it to factor that in then, to be ready for anything? Obviously, you can't predict everything, but to be ready to accept that you're not just going to go in a straight line, that there are going to be hurdles, there are going to be successes, there's going to be highs and lows. But as long as you consider them, that you can successfully get to that end point.
I think organizations need to understand that digital transformation is not a single project, and it is not something that can be done within a few months. For medium to large size organizations, digital transformation will probably take years. And it is an ongoing process. And so organizations need to have a longer term strategy for digital transformation. So the CEOs and the CXOs and the other members of the board need to outline a longer term strategy and then kind of break it down into shorter term flexible goals. It is important for organizations to have that strategic agility, wherein they have these longer-term goals and vision, but at the same time have shorter-term, projects and initiatives, and you kind of monitor them over a period of time, and you have flexibility with those. But the most important thing is to communicate this effectively. Today, having a digital strategy is an imperative, and many progressive organizations are kind of building a company brand based on digital. So they are they're promoting their company brand on their digital achievements and initiatives. And so therefore, going forward, that's going to be critical. The reputation of the organization will increasingly depend on its digital capabilities. As more and more of the business shifts from physical, products and services to digital products and services, it's absolutely critical. It'll become absolutely critical for them to build a digital reputation or a brand around it.
Now, looking at yourself and looking at your kind of professional experience, it's clear that you have a specialization and you're very knowledgeable and experienced in the emerging markets of the Middle East and Africa. I want to look zoom in a little bit more then in terms of the innovation curve and the digital curve, as it were, of the UAE in general, versus maybe not necessarily versus, but running alongside the other areas of the world. Like, tell me, broadly speaking, what the digital maturity, as it were, of the UAE currently looks like.
Well, the story of the UAE is a fascinating one. The UAE is a fairly, relatively young country. It was formed in 1971 with the unification of various emirates, as they call it, or states within the region. And originally the UAE depended heavily on oil resources. So a large part of the GDP of the UAE was driven by oil revenues. But over the years, over the decades, the UAE has been very strongly focusing on diversifying its economy away from oil. So UAE kind of realizes that one day oil will be, that they'll run out of oil and that they have to, develop other resources. And so over the years, the UAE has come out with several strategies to diversify. And the transformation of the UAE into a digital nation, as we call it. And I've just published a book called The Digital Nation, which kind of traces and monitors the development of the digital transformation within the UAE. And what has happened is that over the last decade or so, the UAE has been increasingly focused on developing its digital capabilities. We had the Vision 2021, which was launched in 2010, and that increasingly focused on developing the UAE as a knowledge economy, diversifying it away from oil. Right now, the UAE has about 70% of its economy is based on non-oil revenues, and so it wants to further diversify, and sees this opportunity. It sees that it has the opportunity to leverage this digital disruption that we see around the world, that it can leverage that to create a mark for itself in the world. And so a lot of the strategies that have emerged over the last decade or so have been focused on leveraging technologies such as AI, blockchain, IoT, etc., to drive various facets of the economy, including transforming the public sector and driving better citizen experiences and citizen services, but also in transforming the private sector. And also making the UAE an attractive destination for foreign investment, attracting talent from around the world, driving innovation, etc.
And you touched upon something there that I'm always interested to explore a little further. Is you said it's about leveraging best practice, as it were, that's already out there in the world. But how much is that a balance in terms of, while you do want to look at the UAE, so he does want to look at what's the best economies in the best regions, take all the best practices and bring that into the region, versus it wants to establish itself as different and, shall we say, better than that. That must be quite a difficult balancing act then, to sort of look to what other people are doing and saying, okay, we can take the best parts of that, but also kind of define your own path.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. So the UAE has been very clear that it wants to create a path for a separate path or a unique path for itself, and it wants to make a mark in the world, and sees an opportunity by leveraging this digital or technology disruption to do that. However, the term best practices is now not so relevant anymore because of the technological disruption that we see around us. There are no real best practices that are available For example, for the use of AI in government. Everyone around the world, all the countries are still experimenting. They're still learning. So there are no real best practices that are available, especially around these emerging disruptive technologies. And so, therefore, what the UAE is doing is that it's not looking to adopt practices from other countries. It is, of course, trying to learn as much as possible, but it's not trying to adopt those practices as they are. But it's trying to experiment and create its own, create practices that will work for countries such as itself. And so, therefore, it is trying to create its own path. And therefore, a lot of the work that's been happening in the UAE, particularly from the government side, on these technologies, has been based on experimenting, trying out new things, and seeing if it will work for the UAE. So while it has been trying to learn from others and collaborating with various countries around the world, it's also been trying to create its own unique set of practices.
Talk to me a little bit then about the, like you say, there's a number of government-led strategies, two in particular that I'm interested in exploring a little further. One of them is being the UAE Vision 2021. That's not that far away. That's, as we speak today, we're reaching the end of 2019. So in effect, it's just under 2 years away. Tell me a little bit about, explore that vision a little bit further. And I guess if you could sort of say how far along that journey is the UAE currently?
Well, the Vision 2021 was launched in 2010. So it's really a decade or so long vision. And it focused on several areas, key areas, including education, healthcare, economy, etc. But as I said, it's been there has been a great focus on building knowledge industries, and as part of that, technology has been is a core pillar or an underlying foundation for that Vision 2021. So the leveraging of technology has been one of the key elements of that vision. So you see the focus on exploiting technology to drive education, enable healthcare, better citizen services, supporting the private sector, etc. So technology has been at the core of the Vision 2021, and as we get close to the end of that Vision 2021 strategy, we see a lot of developments that have happened which have technology at the center of them. So we've seen the launch of a number of technology-led strategies. So we have the UAE AI strategy 2031, which aims to reduce government costs by 50% by leveraging AI and also fostering the development of AI within the UAE across sectors and the use of AI across sectors. We've seen the launch of the UAE IoT strategy, the UAE Fourth Industrial Revolution strategy, blockchain strategy, etc. So this slew of technology strategies have been launched by the government, which essentially focus on leveraging these technologies to drive government services, but also supporting the private sector and driving innovation within the country.
We talked earlier a little bit about how, when in an organization, how important it is to communicate the vision and the sort of the strategy and the kind of the clear goals from the top down, right to everybody in that business. How does that become, if maybe perhaps more difficult or even easier, when it's the government and we're talking about people in a region? So obviously the people of UAE, not obviously just necessarily the workers, but everybody who lives and operates within this economy. How important is it to kind of maintain that clear transparency and that clear open dialogue as to this is what's happening, this is why it's happening, and this is how it can change our lives?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So the UAE's leaders have been very effective in communicating their digital vision to the senior executives within the government and the private sectors, and also to the citizens. So it's as if this is a personal quest for these leaders. So when these strategies are launched, for example, the AI strategy, the UAE AI 2031 strategy, which I spoke about earlier, the UAE immediately appointed a minister of AI. So it's coming right from the top. So they appointed a minister of AI, and that ministry now oversees the rollout of AI across public sector organizations. It oversees the education, and awareness building around AI. It focuses on driving innovation around AI, etc. So that's an example of AI. Similarly, we have the UAE has launched strategies related to the fourth industrial revolution, blockchain, IoT, etc. Now, for each of these strategies, the communication and the vision of and the communication of the vision comes right from the top. So it's the senior leaders of the country, the Prime Minister of the country, for example, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, who's been very vocal in terms of telling the government, the businesses, and the citizens and residents of the country that this is something that we have to leverage. This technological disruption is something that we can harness, to create a better country, to offer better services. One of the things that all of this has been brought together to focus upon is happiness. So Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, the Prime Minister, has been talking about making UAE the happiest nation in the world, and a lot of these technology strategies kind of come together and focus on the happiness agenda of the country. So there's a national agenda for happiness and well-being, and technologies such as AI and mobility and analytics and blockchain and others are being used to work towards that happiness goal.
Now, something that I'm always interested in, particularly when it comes to a transformational journey of a whole economy, of a region, is you've talked about public sector, you've talked about private sector. Now, having spoken to people who work in both, separately in each one, I'm curious, because obviously this is led by government. Is there a fine line between the two? Because obviously it's different how the two sectors operate. But is there close collaboration, or do they operate quite separately from one another, but still aligned to that overarching vision?
In the UAE, the public sector has been at the forefront of this transformation. The public sector has been the first to adopt and harness the emerging technologies such as AI or blockchain, IoT, etc. So they have been experimenting with these technologies, developing use cases, creating innovation labs, raising awareness among public sector employees, communicating with the public, and leveraging these technologies to redesign citizen and resident experiences and all of that. So public sector has been at the forefront of embracing these technologies. What has then happened is that the private sector is now beginning to follow suit. So the private sector has been following that path. Many of the progressive organizations within the private sector are now also transforming very, very rapidly. So, for example, the aviation sector, the retail and hospitality sectors, banking and financial services sectors, they're also very rapidly transforming. However, there is still a long way to go in terms of the transformation of the SMEs, the small and medium enterprises, and some of the other sectors as well. So in terms of all of this transformation, it's really public sector that kind of sets the tone, brings out these interesting use cases, provides the environment for innovation, and then it also provides framework and regulation to drive the innovation. So, for example, around AI, we have the Smart Dubai office, which is responsible for the digital transformation of Dubai, the city of Dubai. So this organization has already come out with its AI ethical toolkit for the ethical development of AI. And that kind of provides a regulatory framework for the private sector organizations, for technology startups, etc., to develop AI in an ethical manner. So similarly, there are initiatives that are going about to develop a regulatory environment for these emerging technologies, because many of these technologies are kind of, very, very new. There are no existing regulations and policies for the use of these technologies. And so one of the ways in which that the government is driving the increased adoption and usage and innovation around these technologies is by innovating on regulations itself.
Now, you mentioned right there, of course, and you said earlier about for example, the Vision being launched in 2010. These transformational journeys are often very long. A lot can change, in that time from the day you start to the day as we've said, you don't stop, but the day you reach a sort of a goal and continue to evolve and do something differently. How important is it then, excuse me, to make sure that throughout any form of journey, whether it is something like the UAE Vision or whether it is for a company, to factor in moments where you stop and look back and reflect on successes and on failures and on lessons learned, so that so that your vision and your goal continues to remain relevant, rather than you just whether you just go blindly and don't think about how successful you've been or how unsuccessful you've been. That you are constantly looking back and championing where successes have been, and also reflecting where things haven't quite gone to plan.
Yeah, it is important. It is important to monitor success and to celebrate success, and also to address the gaps and failures. And the UAE has been quite effective in doing that. So for many of these initiatives, the government publishes results from time to time. So, for example, the happiness agenda, which is one of the key focus areas for the government, it has come out with happiness ratings for various organizations within the public sector. In fact, some of the private sector organizations have also started publishing their happiness ratings. So these are being monitored. Recently, in the public sector, there has been an initiative was launched to rate customer service centers within the UAE. So the Prime Minister himself is involved in this, and just a couple of months ago, the rating was done for over 600 customer service centers across the UAE. These are citizen service centers, and of the 600, the top 5 were celebrated, and the bottom 5 were named and shamed. And so there's now a rating system for all these citizen service centers. Similarly, there are several metrics that are being used to measure the success of these initiatives across different public sector organizations, and these are published from time to time. So that is absolutely critical. A measurement of the success of these initiatives is absolutely critical. And that is being done. And most of these senior executives within the public sector, the ministers included, have KPIs which are based on these metrics now. In terms of reflecting back, the UAE has been the UAE's leaders very often they come out with new strategies which kind of address the weaknesses and gaps and failures that they faced in the previous ones. So they kind of redefine the charters from time to time. There are several initiatives that are underway when on an annual basis there are new charters which are drawn out, new plans which are drawn which are drawn up, and they very, very honestly address some of the challenges and weaknesses that the country has faced during the execution of the previous strategies and plans.
And my final question then, obviously there's no single guarantee of success. There's no one thing that everyone can do that no matter what will happen, it will always, like I say, guarantee success. But if you could perhaps try and offer someone, a business or a professional who are embarking on a transformation journey, a digital transformation as it were, what's one piece of advice you would give that you think, in amongst all the other complexities and all the other changes and the things that they have to sort of consider, following this one thing will if not necessarily guarantee success, will help steer them in the right direction?
Well, I think that most organizations today realize that digital transformation is absolutely essential. That in most industries there are there is disruption going on. There are startups, digital native organizations, digital disruptors who are disrupting the traditional business models. And so most organizations realize that in order to thrive in the new economy, that they need to undergo transformation. However, the majority of them run into several hurdles, right? So they have hurdles which are related to legacy systems, technology challenges, data silos, old KPIs and goals, which are outdated KPIs and goals. But the most important element is the top-down vision and strategy for transformation. I think that is key. If you do not have a CEO and senior executives who really believe in transformation, then it's going to be very, very hard for the people down the pyramid to drive the transformation. So it's absolutely critical for the senior level executives, the C-level executives, to clearly articulate what their vision for digital transformation is, and then kind of break it down and simplify that, and communicate that to the various lines of business, and kind of bring them together, galvanize the various lines of business, rally the employees around that vision, and then monitor from regularly and communicate the results of that. That's also very, very important. Oftentimes I see organizations which have a very good-looking, very, very nice-looking vision on paper, but they don't have effective means of monitoring their progress, and they often are shy to communicating the results of their progress along that journey. So it's important to have that vision, communicate that in simple terms, to the employees and to the various senior execs within the organization, bring them together, align them, and then very regularly communicate what's happened and what's worked and what's not worked. That is absolutely critical.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And final question then is, you mentioned earlier, of course, that you co-authored a book. Can you tell us a bit more about, in terms of where one could find that book to read more about it?
So I have co-authored a book along with Dr. Saeed Dahiri. This book is called Digital Nation. This is the first of its kind book on the digital transformation journey of the UAE. It traces the journey. It analyzes the successes and failures of the nation as it looks to harness this technological disruption to create a mark for itself in the world. It is based on in-depth interviews with over 20 of the top executives and leaders of the country across different public and private sector organizations. And it talks about their experiences. It has a number of anecdotes and stories and quotes about what worked for them and what did not work for them. And I believe that it has a lot of learnings for countries around the world, for public sector policymakers, but also for private sector leaders. About how the UAE has approached digital transformation, what's worked for them, what's not worked for them. So there are lots of learnings in there. Ultimately, the aim of the UAE is to create a future that's based on digital, and it is trying to leverage this technological disruption and innovation to create that future. So there's lots of learnings there for senior executives and policymakers around the world. This book is now available in stores within the UAE, but online it's also available at booksarabia.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Insight Podcast in association with the Interface.net and CPOstrategy.com. The Digital Insight is brought to you by B2E Media Limited. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate and review. And don't forget to check out our podcast archive at www.b2e-media.com/The Digital Insight.